Hey guys, before we get to our conversation today on Sports Spectrum, I need to tell you about an amazing idea for a holiday gift. And we're so proud of this. It's brand new from the producers of Sports Spectrum. It's called The Increase 52-Week Devotional. It's a new book out, inspiring stories of faith from the world of pro sports. So if you know someone that loves Jesus and loves sports, maybe they just like Sports Spectrum and what we're all about, this Increase 52-Week devotional is perfect. Now, the idea of the increase stems from John 3:30. He must increase, we must decrease, living in the increase of Christ. And so I want to encourage you to check this out. This is the perfect stocking stuffer, perfect small gift. Maybe you know someone at church and you want to give them a gift. The Increase 52-Week devotional is perfect. Inspiring stories of faith from the world of pro sports. It is out now. You can get it at Amazon, of course, or at theincrease.com. So go to theincrease.com and you can buy it right there. The Increase 52-Week devotional, available now. It's a perfect holiday gift.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
And welcome everyone to today's Sports Spectrum podcast. I am Jason Romano. We are so glad that you tuned into our show today. And we got a great conversation, one of the more inspiring conversations that you'll ever hear on the show today with Johnny Agar. He is the author of the book, The Impossible Mile: The Power in Living Life One Step at a Time. Johnny's the author, and he wrote this with his mom, Becky. His mom, Becky, also joins us here today on the show. And you got to hear about Johnny. I mean, his story is absolutely incredible. It shows the impact of a life lived to its fullest, from the first difficult steps in training to becoming, among other things, a brand ambassador for a global apparel company like Under Armour. Johnny was born with cerebral palsy. He's used a wheelchair and depended on others to care for him, and he took his first steps, 23 total steps at 11 years old. And now he's an athlete, just what he always dreamed about, competing in 5K races. Now he's competing in Ironman triathlons with his dad. I mean, this is just truly an inspiring story. The book, again, is called The Impossible Mile. Johnny Agar and his mom, Becky Agar, are our guests today on Sports Spectrum. I think you're going to really love hearing this conversation. Hi, Becky. Hi, Johnny. How are you guys?
Hi, Jason. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks so much for having us.
So good to have both of you. Thank you. Absolutely. I'm excited about this. From wheelchair bound to Ironman athlete, Johnny reveals how he overcame the odds in the impossible mile in this book. I'm just so excited about it. It came out back in September. I'm curious, Becky, maybe you can start and tell us kind of how the response has been since the release of the book, because I happen to have written a couple myself. And I know once you put a book out there, it's out there for everybody to see. You can't come back now. And I just wonder for you how that response has been from your perspective as the mom of Johnny and seeing people read this book.
Yeah, you're right. It's a scary thing. We've got some really personal stories in there, and, it's really about our life, and you're opening up really to the world to see, for the world to see. So it was a scary thing, but you know what? I have to say the response has been so wonderful. We're just so very appreciative for, all the text messages and the people reach out and say, hey, I just read your book. And, certain stories that touch them just make my heart really happy. And I love, one of the greatest things to see is your son being able to encourage others to tackle whatever it is that their challenge is. And so what a gift as a mom to be able to see that your son is doing that for other people. So
yeah, that's great. Johnny, you have a book with your name on it. How cool is that, buddy?
It's really awesome. And, it's really a testament to what my parents have taught me all the time. And that is that, you can achieve anything you put your mind to. And, I'm a kid who can barely write his name, or could barely write his name. And here I am writing a book. So, it's just, I hope it shows people that, whatever challenges you have, they don't have to hold you back from accomplishing what you want to do. So
yeah, I mean, if anybody might recognize your name, Johnny, I know back in, I think it was 2013, you did ESPN. My former employer did the E60 feature on you. I'm wondering, Becky, when people started to learn your story, learn Johnny's story, what was that like initially when you started getting, maybe E60 was the first, but I'm guessing there was others before that. But just having that story be seen by the public, because you're walking through your own journey as it is. And suddenly everybody you probably know this already. A lot of people watch ESPN. So a lot of people will probably have said they've seen that story. What was that like initially when the public is now seeing kind of the story and the journey that you and Johnny and your whole family have been on?
Yeah, when Johnny decided to walk that mile, he did it because for several reasons. He'd always wanted to be an athlete. My husband used to play for the Tigers in the minor leagues, and he had always aspired to be like his dad. And so when he decided to walk that mile, we thought at the time that's a big goal to have, but he did it, and he was able to. After the race, he looked up at me and he said, Mom, wouldn't that be really cool if I inspired another person in a wheelchair to get up and walk or to get up and tackle their challenge? And I said, Johnny, that would be really awesome, wouldn't it? And that's what we thought. He didn't do it for that reason. But we thought that might be a really great thing to be able to inspire one person. And then we started hearing from people all over the world after the E60 piece. I mean, the Marshall Islands and Philippines and everywhere. And it was Asia. And it was just incredible to see how it had touched not just people with disabilities, but people who were struggling with whatever challenge it was that they were facing at the time. They wanted to lose weight, or they wanted to get off their addiction, or, and Johnny gave them the courage because they saw him walk and they thought, well, if he can walk, I can certainly try to do what it is that I'm battling. And so it was a great thing. And we give a shout out to Matt Rissmiller, who was the producer of that piece. He's still a dear friend of ours. And he said to us at the time, this is going to be something that you'll always look back on and have, a video of Johnny's life, basically. And he was totally right. So it's just been a wonderful thing for us to be able to share with people. And
now I consider it, a mission after that piece. I just did it because I love to do it. Yeah. And now because people have given me a mission now to say, what, this is my calling from God. This is what he wanted me to do. And this is how he uses my disability to encourage others. So
yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. Johnny inspired people. He ended up inspiring people, but really it's the people that give back to him and inspire him to do more. So
yeah, people say that I inspire them. I get that all the time, but really, them saying that to me helped me in return. So it's kind of a cycle of inspiration is what I like to say. So
no, that's a good cycle to have. And you inspire, certainly just being here talking to you, Johnny, has inspired me, and having your book, The Impossible Mile, is available now. And we're going to be talking right now to Johnny and Becky a little bit more here on Sports Spectrum. Becky, I do want to ask you, can you kind of share a little bit about Johnny's story and kind of what that journey's been like since he was born? For those, I think we kind of jumped right into the book, but we didn't really give a chance for our listener to kind of know the background a little bit on the battle that Johnny has been through these many years and sort of this impossible mile, maybe everything leading up to that impossible mile.
Sure. So Johnny was our firstborn, and we got the news early on that he had a bleed in his brain. He was born prematurely, 11 weeks premature, and he was 3 pounds, a little over 3 pounds when he was born. Mm-hmm. And the doctor called us, Jeff and I, into his office and said, we've got some news. We noticed on the CAT scan that he has this bleed, and where the bleed is, it looks like he's going to be affected and he's going to have cerebral palsy. And so at the time we said, and he told us it's hard to say now, but where the bleed is, it looks like he's probably not going to be able to walk and may not talk. We just don't know yet. And so Jeff and I, as new parents, and, we wanted what was best for Johnny. And so we said to the doctor, okay, what can we read? At the time, the internet was not a thing. I know I'm aging myself on that one, but
no, I was there too.
But the internet wasn't a thing. And so we said, what books can we read? And he said, I have shelves of books behind me. I can give those to you. You can take them with you. But he said, what I found is that people who read those books sometimes will anticipate things happening when they may not. And so he said, you can read the books, or you can just choose to love him as your son and take it day by day. Best advice, very first piece of advice we'd ever gotten. And we chose to walk away without the books and love him as our son and take it day by day. And both Jeff and I had decided in raising Johnny that we didn't want him really to know that he had cerebral palsy. So we didn't want the therapist to say it. We didn't want our family to talk about it. And it wasn't because we were in denial, because we had gotten that a lot. There was no way we could be in denial because we lived with him, right? We knew what his limitations were and what his struggles were, but we wanted him to be able to decide what his limitations were when he was old enough to understand what cerebral palsy was. And one example, when he was in school, he didn't do scissors. He couldn't do scissors very well.
We talk about this in the book.
Yeah, he didn't like cutting. And the teacher said that's to be expected. Kids with cerebral palsy don't have a good attention span.
Right.
And instead of looking at it as, well, you know what, he doesn't like to cut. And so he can't walk away or run away like a little kid could. So he's going to disengage by looking around and not being interested in it. So it was that kind of thing that we just kept being reminded, okay, we want to stay true to raising him just as a typical young little boy. And so that meant he had to do chores around the house. Whenever he wanted to play, we always had him involved. If he couldn't throw a ball, which he really wasn't good at throwing a ball, he'd throw it backwards. So we'd have him ump at our family games, our pickup games and things like that. So we always had him involved. We got him out on the ice skating, and that was an interesting thing. When you put a kid who can't walk on ice skates, it's a challenge, but I think it was important for him to see that life wasn't going to be easy. Everything was going to be hard for him. And we didn't want to make it easy for him because we knew life wasn't going to be easy. And we raised him to know, I think the key was to know and believe in himself, because we knew God had a plan for him and we didn't know what that plan was, but we wanted him to know that he was loved no matter what. And I think that really helped him to not be afraid to try things, because he knew God always had his back.
I'm wondering, from a parent perspective, as a person of faith, who I'm guessing your faith has been with you for a long time, did you ever have any issues with your faith with God? Like, were you ever angry at him because of the situation or the circumstances? Or was that something that you always embraced and said, okay, God, you have a plan. I'm not going to question you. We're just going to push forward, trusting you. What was that like for you, kind of with your faith?
So to back up a few years, my life has been kind of a journey in and of itself with my faith. I have lost every member of my family from accidents. So it was just me. And so by the time Johnny was born, I kept a journal, and I was very intentional about keeping journals. Not only did it help me process things, but it was my way of being able to talk to God too. Yeah. And so to look back at the journals, this is the most beautiful thing to me. When Johnny was born, I would write and say, I don't understand, God, why you are doing this to me. I don't get it. I was mad. Sure. And I questioned a lot. And I said, why are you doing this? I just wanted to, my life has been turmoil pretty much my whole entire life. And I just wanted to have a nice family and just be happy. And now you've given me this son that has this disability. I don't understand. Now it's a beautiful thing to look back 27 years later and God gave me the answer. I understand now why he gave me this son with cerebral palsy. I didn't know at the time, but it's a beautiful gift to be able to see that and say, I get it. And sometimes you don't have that answer. Sometimes you never have that answer, but that's where faith comes into play, right? You have to believe that there's a reason for things happening. And my family, dying when I was at an early age at different times in my life, like every 5 years, it seemed to happen. And I would always question that, but it was my faith and my way of saying, if something good comes out of this, then their death is a good thing. That's how I looked at it. And so I always tried to stay on the positive, knowing that God had this wonderful plan. And now I look at it and I see my kids who are now all grown, and I've been able to pass that on to them. Both Jeff and I have been able to pass that on to them so that they appreciate things. They appreciate every day that they're given. They have a different perspective on life. And so that's kind of how I did that. So yes, to answer your question, I was very angry, very upset, did a lot of questioning, but ultimately I knew that, I had to let go and let God take charge of what was happening. So.
Yeah, we hear let go and let God a lot as sort of a cliche, but when you actually have to walk through it and live it, and you come out on the other side, you realize there's a cliche for a reason, right? It's exactly. The real thing. Johnny, how about you? How important is God in your faith and in kind of helping you achieve and push forward and accomplish, and man, having the courage to do all that you've been able to do and telling your story? Tell us about that and how important that is for you.
I think God has given me a unique way of looking at failure because I fail a lot in life. I have to fail in order for me to understand how to succeed. And maybe that's the case for everybody. But for me, having a physical disability, I have to look at things from maybe a different perspective, and so maybe it takes me a little bit longer. But again, my plan is not God's plan, and I have to understand that He will give me things or maybe do things in His due time, not in mine. So
yeah, that's really good.
The way I look at things. So
no, that's a good way to look at it. Again, the new book is called The Impossible Mile. Becky, I'm curious when you guys were presented with, maybe you were presented with this idea, or maybe you had the idea and presented it to somebody else, but writing a book is hard. I know this, I've done too. It's very hard. It's not something I really, to be honest, enjoyed the process of. When it's out and it's done, that's great. But can you take us back to when the idea of writing this book came about and why you decided to kind of pursue this challenge, I'll call it that, with writing the book?
Yeah. So after Johnny walked his mile and, more people had heard about it and they were asking Johnny to come speak to their organizations or their companies. And the more he would start doing motivational talks and speeches, people would come up to us afterwards and say, okay, I want to know more about your life. How did you do this? Or why did you end up doing this? And they would want a book and to read. So we always knew that a book was something that we wanted to do. But at the time, Johnny was a student at Aquinas College. He was studying a double major, and it was taking up a lot of his time, and he wanted to.
I lived with my mom and dad my whole college career, so I didn't have any let-ups. They were always pushing me to be diligent in my studies, which is important. So
yeah,
totally.
When the mom's 8, it's kind of hard to slack a little bit. But after when he graduated from Aquinas, we said, okay, now is the time to start writing the book. And that's what we did. And it just so happened that COVID hit. And we thought, it's a great time to get a book out that is going to encourage people when we think that they needed it the most. So,
yeah.
And my mom was I was homeschooled all through grade school and high school. Yeah. So mom was my writing partner. And so we had a good system down as to how we did things. And so it really brought us together a little bit, hearing, reflecting on some of the stories in the book when I was little. So, and I do a lot of races with my dad, so it gave me an opportunity to do something special with mom that I'll have forever too. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a great way to look at it. And I have to imagine, Becky, it was a little therapeutic probably too, walking through this. I mean, you've lived through it, but when you look back, I call it pulling boxes out of the attic, right? You have to pull boxes out of the attic and kind of look at the memories. Some are good, some are not so good, at least in my situation. For you, what was that like? Was it a little therapeutic to kind of go through this process?
Very I think it was therapeutic for me and for Johnny as well. I think there were some stories in there, that when Johnny was little, especially the butterfly story that always just gets to me every time I read it. But when we were writing it, I would just start sobbing and Johnny would take his power chair and he'd turn around and he'd slowly walk away from me and he'd say, just let me know when you're done. Because he knew I just needed a moment to cry and sort things through. And, but it was really eye-opening because, for him, I think knowing what Jeff and I went through, in order to get him to this point.
Because some of the things that is in there when I was really small, I don't know. So.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that was an eye-opening thing for him. And for me, it was very eye-opening because at first he was very factual, when we were going over what we were going to put. And I said, Johnny, you really have to open up because people need to see your struggles. They need to know what you were thinking and what you're going through so that they can relate to that. And so when he started opening up, I'd start crying again and he'd go away. Yeah. But, it was very eye-opening to me because, even though he lived with us and, obviously we raised him, we didn't know what he was thinking a lot of the time. And to hear, his struggles of wanting to date and wanting to drive, when he was a teenager, it was very difficult. I was kind of the person who he'd be looking out the window and he'd be watching the neighborhood kids and playing. And it just killed me that he wasn't out there playing. So I would grab him and I'd take him out there and I'd play with all the neighborhood kids with him, running around the bases with him or doing something. And then when he got older and bigger and I couldn't do that, that was extremely difficult for me because I wanted so badly for him to, and it's a different thing when you're little and you have your mom take you out there. It's not a big deal. But when you're 14, 15, 16, and your mom is out there playing a game with you, not good. So it was a balancing act and trying to figure out how we could still keep him involved. And that's how running came to be. Annie just started running one day and Jeff said, well, he didn't want her out running through the streets without somebody there with her. And so he started riding his bike and then he kind of realized that's kind of pathetic. I should be out there running with her. He started running, but then she got faster and he would be running basically by himself. So that's when he decided, let's get a jogger and have Johnny run with me.
Well, I had started with a group called My Team Triumph because adaptive sports and wheelchair sports weren't really possible for me because I could only use one hand. So we like to say that, having a kid who can only use one hand isn't necessarily conducive for you because no one wants a kid on a team who can only go in circles. So, triathlon was really a way for Dad and I to do something together, but also, it really gave me an opportunity to see what you can do with the human body when you push yourself every day. And I think, with me having a disability, that's really important for me to see people doing that, because you get enough people around you, you get a team around you, and you understand what you can do. So I think sports has really been important for me in that way. And I did enough races with Dad to where I said, this is enough's enough. I heard Dad panting behind me, and I said, okay, I need to do more than just, him pushing me. I need to show him that I appreciate him. So that's when my walking came to be, and it really gave me a new perspective on things, and really gave me stuff to work on, which made me stronger every day and made my doctors happy.
Absolutely.
He looked up to athletes like you would not believe. I mean, when he was little, he learned he learned how to count based on the jerseys, and he learned how to read based on the stats and the names on the jerseys. So sports, he just loved it. And he would emulate all sorts of athletes when he was going through therapy. Even when he was 4 years old, I kid you not, he would not do therapy. We had to go to Poland for some therapy, and he would not participate unless he had a Steve Yzerman jersey on, or a Robert Crochet, the Lion. He had to, because in his mind, he was working out. He was going to work out, and he was going to be that player that he watched out on the ice, or the player out on the field. And that's how he could relate to it. So he always wanted to emulate athletes, and he studied them. And I think one day he just got tired of just not participating and, always watching and studying them. And he just wanted to do it himself, to know what it felt like. And it was funny when he did his first walk, they had a running coach at the time, and his running coach came up to him after the walk and said, Johnny, how did it feel? And he said, Coach, I went out of the gate too fast. And it was to him, and for the coach to say, well, make sure you drink some chocolate milk, for John, that was like the best thing, because he was being treated like an athlete. Yes. Johnny, it was an amazing thing. So all those things, it was just a wonderful thing to be able to watch him.
So when people say that, sports are just games, they're not as important as anything else. But I look at it as such a different way. I look at it as my way of learning, and my way of, understanding things and understanding goal setting. And for me, I think that's really important, and really important for anybody else who competes as well. So
absolutely. It's cool. You might be the greatest athlete we've had on this podcast, Johnny, because we've had NFL MVPs, we've had baseball players, Cy Young Award winners, Hall of Famers.
I think I saw you had Kirk Cousins, right?
We did. We had Kirk on the show. Yeah. And Kirk's a good friend. And I know that Kirk has, I think his name is right on the back of your book. So
it is. Yes, sir.
Well, that's what I want to ask real quick as we wind down. Like Michael Phelps on the front of the book, Scott Van Pelt writing the foreword, Tim Tebow, Tom Izzo from Michigan State, Jim the Rookie Morris, who's been on this show, Kirk Cousins, as you mentioned, been on this show. Those are pretty big names, Johnny. I mean, come on. Like, how cool is it that you're not just a sports fan, but you got some people that you can call friends now who you probably watch on TV doing their thing?
I really enjoy it, because it really shows people, I'm just a kid who can barely walk and is determined to do a lot of things. And I really look at them, and say, I hope that people say, here's this kid who can barely walk with, MVPs and Olympic athletes, and, what can I do? How can I get better? And, it's all about, just pushing yourself to be better every day. And I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful that they can help me show that on my book. So
that's great. Well, Becky, you also have one other person that's fairly well known and actually comes pretty close to you. That's your daughter, which I didn't realize this until we started recording, and I saw the name Agar, and I went and watched E60, and Annie is featured, Annie Agar, in the E60, obviously being Johnny's sister. And I said, wow, she looks really familiar. And this is for 2014. And then I just searched her on my Twitter page and I said, oh my goodness, I follow her on Twitter and she makes these crazy videos. She's like an NFL and college football correspondent. So it has to be for you, Becky, kind of fascinating, I would think, because it's not just Johnny, which, listen, Johnny, your story is incredible, but Annie's kind of carved out her own niche in this sports world too. And it's been kind of fun to watch, I have to imagine.
Oh, we are so proud of her. Yeah, she made the best of a bad situation for sure. COVID hit, and she had been working with our local news station here as a sports reporter, camera person. And anyway, she lost her job because sports got shut down right with COVID.
And they cover a lot of high school sports too. So
Nice.
so she was sitting around thinking, she loves sports as well. And she's always loved the way sports brings people together and how it's just makes people happy. She had to fill in one day and do the news, the actual news, a news story. And it had to do with a very sad story. And she said, I couldn't do it. At least when a team loses, there's some good things that happen inside the game.
Sure.
And it's so she decided to make this video that showcased, she thought, what would it be like to have the Big Ten in a Zoom call all together? And that's kind of how it came to be. And it went viral. And now she's working as the national football and college football correspondent for Bally Sports. And so I'm very proud of her. She
has really taught me a lot because she didn't have any work whatsoever. And now she's, made the best out of
nothing.
Made the best out of nothing to start with. So she's really been an inspiration to me as well. So
that's great. Yeah. Well, the Agar family, obviously, it looks like God's doing some really cool things with you. And again, this new book, The Impossible Mile, forward by Scott Van Pelt. People need to go get this. It's the holiday season. It's the perfect time to pick up this book for either for yourself or give it as a gift for somebody else. Johnny and Becky, you guys are great. Thank you so much for being here on the show. All the best to you, and keep inspiring, Johnny. We appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you, Jason. I really love the podcast, and keep doing your great work as well. God's doing some wonderful things with you too as well, sir.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
We appreciate you having us on.
And many thanks to Johnny and Becky Agar for joining us today on Sports Spectrum. Again, that new book, The Impossible Mile, The Power in Living Life One Step at a Time, is available now everywhere books are found. And I mean, you're talking about Kirk Cousins and Tim Tebow and Michael Phelps giving endorsements, and ESPN's Scott Van Pelt writing the forward. I mean, come on. That's just awesome. And I loved Johnny's heart to, I don't know, there just felt like there was a humility with him as I listened to him speak, and I can sense it as I was watching Becky, his mom, look at him. Johnny talking about how, he inspires other people, but when he hears that, it inspires him. That's a humility that really can't be taught. And so I'm just now the biggest fan of Johnny Agar, and certainly his mom, Becky, is awesome as well. And Annie Agar, which I didn't even discover until we started doing this interview, that Annie, if you watch her on social media, she makes these videos and works with Bally Sports. So it's really a neat thing to watch the whole Agar family thriving, but we're especially thankful for Johnny and for Becky Agar for being our guest today on Sports Spectrum. Listen, if you're inspired by that story or any other stories that you've heard here at Sports Spectrum, could you do us a favor? Tell someone else about what we're doing here at Sports Spectrum, intersecting sports with faith, bringing Jesus into the conversation with stories like Johnny and Becky Agar. And really what this is about is using our podcast, not just for entertainment value, but for a place that can be a resource, right? That you can give to someone else and maybe encourage them. Maybe you know someone who's going through a difficult time. Maybe you know a parent who's had a difficult circumstance with a child. Well, have them listen. First of all, have them get the book, but also have them listen to Johnny and Becky Agar's story. That might encourage them, and maybe they, get that encouragement and get that sort of spirit-filled type of life-giving conversation that they need, which allows them to maybe even pursue a faith and a relationship with God. So I just love talking to Johnny and Becky. I love what we get to do here at Sports Spectrum, and we love that you're listening right now. We do appreciate it. If you're on your podcast app, whatever app that is, make sure you click that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode of all the different interviews we have here at Sports Spectrum. I mean, we run the gamut of sports, right? When having people like Johnny Agar, maybe the coolest athlete, the most impressive athlete that we've had on, but also NFL superstars and Major League Baseball Hall of Famers and basketball players in the NBA, all sorts of different types of guests that we've had on here. I'm just so thankful that we get to do what we get to do. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day, and please do stay safe.